My name is Vada, and I'm 34 years old. I'm sitting here looking at last month's bills, remembering exactly what my husband Jake said to me 3 months ago. After 12 years of marriage and two beautiful children, Emma, who's 10, and Noah, who's 7, he called me a freeloader. He had no idea how much I'd been quietly contributing to our family all along. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt unappreciated in your marriage, please subscribe to hear how I taught my husband an unforgettable lesson. Jake and I met 12 years ago in Denver when we both worked at the same accounting firm. I was 22, fresh out of college with my CPA certification, and he was 24, already climbing the corporate ladder with that confident smile that first caught my attention. We worked on the same audit team for a major retail client, spending long nights poring over spreadsheets and financial statements together. Those late nights turned into coffee runs, then lunch dates, then dinner dates, and within 6 months, we were inseparable. After 2 years of dating, Jake proposed to me at the same coffee shop where we'd had our first unofficial date. I said yes immediately, knowing I wanted to spend my life with this ambitious, charming man who made me laugh even during tax season. We had a beautiful wedding with 150 guests at a vineyard outside Denver, and I thought I was living my dream. When Emma came along 2 years into our marriage, we made what seemed like a logical decision. I was making $70,000 as a senior accountant, but childcare would cost nearly $30,000 a year. Jake had just been promoted to senior manager at $85,000 a year, and we figured it made more sense for me to stay home at least temporarily. I could always go back to work later, we reasoned. Then Noah arrived 3 years later, and temporary became permanent. But I never really stopped working. I just worked differently. Every morning I woke up at 5:30 to prepare breakfast for the family. Jake liked his eggs over easy. With whole wheat toast, Emma needed her oatmeal, with exactly 3 strawberries cut into hearts, and Noah insisted on pancakes shaped like dinosaurs every Tuesday and Thursday. After Jake left for work at 7, I got the kids ready for school, checking homework, signing permission slips, packing lunches with handwritten notes that made them smile. Our house, a 3,500 square foot colonial that we'd bought 5 years ago, required constant attention. I managed everything from scheduling HVAC maintenance to negotiating with contractors when the roof needed repairs. I became an expert at finding the best deals on everything from groceries to car insurance. While Jake focused on his career, I managed our entire financial portfolio, researching investments, rebalancing our 401k allocations, and finding tax deductions that saved us thousands every year. The freelance accounting work I picked up helped too. During school hours, I worked for 3 small businesses doing their books and quarterly taxes. It brought in about $30,000 a year, which I quietly deposited into our joint account. I never made a big deal about it because I saw us as a team. His salary, my earnings, our savings, it all went toward our family's future. I scheduled and attended every doctor's appointment, dentist visit, and parent-teacher conference. When Emma struggled with math in 3rd grade, I spent hours creating fun games to help her understand fractions. When Noah was diagnosed with mild ADHD, I researched behavioral strategies, met with specialists, and implemented a structured routine that helped him thrive. I organized birthday parties that became legendary in our neighborhood, complete with handmade decorations and themed activities that had other parents asking for my secret. Every Sunday, I meal prepped for the entire week, portioning out healthy lunches for Jake to take to work, and preparing ingredients for dinners that could be ready in 30 minutes after soccer practice or piano lessons. I coupon clipped religiously, saving us about $300 a month on groceries alone. I negotiated with service providers, switched us to better phone plans, and even learned basic home repairs from YouTube to avoid calling expensive contractors for minor issues. Through careful budgeting and smart shopping, I managed to save our family about $15,000 a year. I tracked every expense in spreadsheets, analyzed spending patterns, and found ways to cut costs without sacrificing quality of life. When Jake wanted a new golf club membership, I found a way to make it work within our budget. When the kids needed new school supplies or sports equipment, I researched the best deals and often bought in bulk during sales to save for the future. Jake seemed happy with our arrangement for years. He'd come home to a clean house, happy kids, and a hot dinner on the table. He'd brag to his colleagues about his wife's cooking and how well-behaved our children were. But something started changing about a year ago when his colleague Brad got promoted to director before him. Jake became obsessed with climbing higher, staying later at work, networking more aggressively, and constantly comparing our lifestyle to those of his more successful colleagues. He started making little comments about how other wives in his office circle had careers and still managed their households. He'd mention how Brad's wife was a successful real estate agent who also raised 3 kids. Never mind that Brad's wife had a full-time nanny and a housekeeper. Jake only saw the success, not the support system behind it. Everything changed in June when Jake finally got his promotion to director. His salary jumped from $85,000 to $150,000 a year, and for the first week, he was ecstatic. He came home with flowers promising we'd finally take that trip to Hawaii we'd been talking about since our honeymoon. He talked about putting more money into the kids' college funds and maybe even buying a vacation cabin in the mountains. The second week, things started to shift. Jake began staying out later, having drinks with his new peer group, especially his boss Marcus, who'd been a director for 5 years and loved to flaunt his wealth. Jake would come home talking about Marcus's new Tesla, Marcus's kids' private tutors, Marcus's wife's designer handbags. I watched my husband transform from a content family man into someone constantly measuring himself against others. By the third week, the criticism started. He walked into the house one evening, looked around the living room where Noah's Legos were scattered on the coffee table, and Emma's art project was drying on the dining table, and said the house looked like a daycare center. When I served his favorite chicken parmesan for dinner, he pushed it around his plate and mentioned that Marcus's wife had taken cooking classes at Le Cordon Bleu. When I showed him Emma's report card with all A's and 1 B+, he asked why we weren't investing in additional tutoring like his colleague Sarah did for her children. I tried to brush off these comments, attributing them to the stress of his new position. But they kept coming, each one a little sharper than the last. He questioned why I was still shopping at regular grocery stores instead of Whole Foods, why the kids weren't enrolled in more extracurricular activities, why our house didn't look like the ones in architectural magazines. The breaking point came on a Friday evening 3 months ago. Jake had been at a company celebration for landing a major client, and he came home after midnight smelling of whiskey and expensive cologne. I was still up reconciling our monthly expenses on my laptop at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, kids long asleep, and I'd been waiting to discuss some important financial matters with him. I showed him the stack of bills that needed his attention, including the property tax installment that was due the following week. I'd already organized everything, calculated the amounts, and even written the checks. All he needed to do was sign them. But instead of the usual quick signatures and thank you, Jake slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed through the kitchen, and I saw Emma's light flip on upstairs through the doorway. Jake's face was red, his eyes slightly unfocused from the alcohol, but his words were crystal clear. I make $150,000 a year now, Vada. $150,000. Do you understand what that means? I'm in the top tier at my company. And what do? You sit at home playing housewife, moving papers around, pretending you're contributing something meaningful. I heard Emma's door creak open, her little feet on the landing. Noah's voice called out sleepily, asking if everything was okay. I kept my voice steady and called up that Daddy and I were just talking, they should go back to bed. But Jake wasn't done. You're nothing but a freeloader living off my success, he continued, his voice getting louder. I'm the one who gets up every morning and goes to battle in the corporate world. I'm the one whose name is on the big salary. You contribute nothing. Nothing. You just spend my money and act like organizing bills is some kind of achievement. The numbers don't lie, Vada. My salary pays for this entire lifestyle, this house, the cars, the kids' education, everything. You're just along for the ride. I stared at my husband, this man I'd loved for 12 years, who'd held my hand through 36 hours of labor with Emma, who'd cried when Noah took his first steps, who'd once written me a poem for our anniversary about how I was the glue that held our family together. That man seemed like a stranger now, replaced by someone drunk on his own perceived importance. I could have argued. I could have pulled up the spreadsheets showing my freelance income, the detailed documentation of how much money I saved us each year through careful management. I could have calculated the market rate for a full-time nanny housekeeper, personal chef, financial advisor, and personal assistant, then shown him that my unpaid labor was worth well over $100,000 a year. But I didn't. Instead, I looked him straight in the eye and asked quietly, "Is that really what you think of me? That I'm just a freeloader? The numbers don't lie," he repeated, swaying slightly. "My salary, my success, my house?" I nodded slowly, closing my laptop with a soft click. "You're absolutely right, Jake. Your money, your rules. I understand completely." He seemed surprised by my calm response, expecting perhaps tears or arguments. But I just gathered the bills, placed them in front of him, and said, "Since it's all your money and your responsibility, I'll let you handle these from now on. Good night." As I walked upstairs, I heard him muttering something about finally getting through to me. I checked on both kids, tucking them back in with reassurances that everything was fine. But as I lay in bed that night next to my snoring husband, I knew everything was about to change. Saturday morning arrived with Jake's predictable hangover and mumbled non-apology about being stressed at work. I smiled, made him coffee and toast, and didn't mention the previous night's conversation. But while he nursed his headache in front of ESPN, I was already implementing my carefully thought-out plan. First, I opened my own bank account at a different bank across town. I transferred my next freelance payment there instead of our joint account. Then I created the most detailed spreadsheet of my life, documenting every single way I contributed to our household. I went back through 5 years of records, calculating every dollar saved through couponing, every investment gain I'd researched and implemented, every costly mistake I'd prevented through careful planning. The numbers were staggering. Through strategic grocery shopping, meal planning, and bulk buying, I saved us approximately $4,800 annually. By negotiating insurance rates, phone plans, and utility providers, another $3,600. The investment changes I'd researched and implemented had earned us an extra $42,000 over 5 years. My freelance income over the past 5 years totaled $140,000. The free childcare, housekeeping, and personal services I provided would cost at least $70,000 annually at market rates. But I wasn't going to show Jake these numbers. Not yet. Instead, I was going to let him experience life without my contributions. The new rules were simple. I would continue taking care of the children because they were innocent in this situation. I would cook for them, clean their spaces, manage their schedules, and help with homework. But Jake, he was on his own. I stopped washing his clothes, leaving his dirty laundry in a pile in the corner of our bedroom. I stopped cooking his portions of meals, making exactly enough for myself and the kids. His side of the bedroom became his responsibility to clean. I removed his calendar from my phone and stopped reminding him about appointments, family events, or important dates. When bills arrived, I placed them on his home office desk without opening them. The first few days, Jake didn't notice much. He grabbed takeout for lunch, and dinner threw his clothes in the wash when he ran out of clean shirts, and seemed almost proud of his independence. He made comments about how easy it was, how he didn't need anyone to take care of him. I continued my routine with the children, making sure their lives remained stable. When Emma asked why Daddy was eating different food, I simply said he wanted to try new things. When Noah wondered why Daddy's laundry wasn't in the basket with theirs, I explained that Daddy was learning to do things himself like a big boy. The kids accepted these explanations with the easy adaptability of children. I also started accepting more freelance clients. With the time I saved from not managing Jake's needs, I could take on 2 additional small businesses. My monthly income increased to $4,000, all going into my personal account. I hired a babysitter for 3 afternoons a week, paying her from my own money, so I could meet with clients in person and expand my network. When Jake asked why there was a stranger watching the kids, I sweetly explained that since he felt I contributed nothing, I was working on contributing something. He grumbled about unnecessary expenses, not realizing the babysitter cost less than what I was earning in those hours. By the second week, Jake started asking questions. Where were his favorite shirts? Why wasn't there coffee ready in the morning? Why did his home office smell musty? I responded to each question with variations of the same answer. Since you make all the money and handle everything, I figured you'd want to manage these things yourself too. He tried to turn it into a joke at first, laughing with his colleagues about how his wife was being dramatic. But I could see the cracks starting to form in his facade of self-sufficiency. He showed up to work in a wrinkled shirt one day because he didn't know how to use the iron. He missed his dentist appointment because I hadn't reminded him, resulting in a $50 cancellation fee. He forgot to pay the water bill on time, incurring a late charge. The refrigerator became a point of contention. I labeled everything clearly. Kids and Vada only. When Jake protested that this was ridiculous, I reminded him that according to his calculations, his money paid for everything, so he could certainly buy his own groceries with his substantial salary. He stormed off to the store, coming back with random items that didn't constitute actual meals, just expensive snacks and frozen dinners. I maintained my pleasant demeanor through it all, never arguing, never raising my voice. When the kids were around, I was the picture of a content wife and mother. But Jake was slowly drowning in the details of daily life he'd never noticed before. His dry cleaning piled up because he forgot to drop it off. His car registration expired because I hadn't reminded him to renew it. He ran out of his prescription medication because he didn't realize it needed to be refilled in advance. 3 weeks into my silent protest, Jake's mother called me, confused why Jake had forgotten her birthday. For 12 years, I'd been the one sending cards and gifts on his behalf, maintaining relationships with his family. I apologized to her, explaining that Jake was handling his own affairs now, and perhaps she should speak with him directly. The 45-minute lecture he received from his mother about being an ungrateful son was audible from downstairs. By the end of the first month, Jake's initial bravado had completely crumbled. The house was divided into 2 distinct zones: the clean, organized areas where the kids and I lived, and Jake's chaotic spaces. His home office had become a disaster zone of unopened mail, dirty dishes, and wrinkled clothes. He'd resorted to buying new dress shirts, rather than figuring out the ironing board, and his food expenses had tripled from constant takeout orders. The financial hemorrhaging started almost immediately. Without my careful meal planning, Jake was spending $50 a day on food just for himself, sometimes more when he ordered from high-end restaurants, to maintain his new director image. That alone was $1,500 a month compared to the $800 I used to spend feeding our entire family nutritious home-cooked meals. The second week brought the first major crisis. Jake had been in the middle of an important video conference with international clients when the internet suddenly cut out. He hadn't paid the bill despite the 3 notices I'd quietly placed on his desk. The service disconnection during a critical presentation made him look unprofessional in front of Marcus and the senior leadership team. The reconnection fee was $200, plus a $50 expedited service charge to get it restored the same day. He'd forgotten his mother's birthday, but that was just the beginning of his social failures. 2 weeks later, he missed his nephew's graduation party, his college roommate's baby shower, and most embarrassingly, Marcus's wife's charity gala that all directors were expected to attend. Each missed event required expensive apology gifts and awkward explanations. The charity gala absence was particularly damaging. Marcus had made pointed comments about family support being crucial for leadership roles. Without clean clothes properly maintained, Jake's professional appearance began to suffer. He didn't know about fabric softener, so his shirts were stiff and uncomfortable. He didn't understand water temperature settings, so his navy suit came out with white streaks from mixing it with bleached items. A red sock turned his entire collection of white dress shirts pink. He spent $500 at Nordstrom buying new clothes, rather than admitting he needed help. The missed appointments started adding up financially and professionally. The dentist appointment he forgot cost him a $300 emergency visit when his filling fell out during a business lunch. The forgotten car registration led to a traffic stop and a $350 fine. He missed the early bird registration for a mandatory professional conference, costing the company an extra $1,000, which didn't go unnoticed by the finance department. Then came the summer camp fiasco. Every February, I'd always registered the kids for their preferred summer camps, which filled up quickly. Jake didn't know this. By the time he remembered in April, after Emma tearfully asked if she could go to art camp with her best friend Sophie, everything was full. He had to scramble to find alternatives, ending up with camps that cost twice as much, and required driving to different locations, disrupting his work schedule. The household maintenance disasters were almost comical if they weren't so expensive. He didn't know the HVAC filters needed monthly changing, leading to a system breakdown during a 90-degree heat wave. Emergency repair on a Sunday cost $1,200. He didn't know about the quarterly pest control service, and we got ants in the kitchen requiring a $400 emergency treatment. The lawn service needed to be scheduled in advance for spring treatment. By the time he remembered, our yard was full of weeds, while our neighbors' lawns looked pristine, earning us a warning from the HOA. Jake tried to maintain his facade at work, but the stress was showing. He showed up to meetings unprepared because I wasn't keeping his calendar synchronized. He forgot about the quarterly report deadline because I hadn't reminded him 2 weeks in advance like I always used to. Marcus pulled him aside after he showed up to a client dinner at the wrong restaurant, having confused the dates in his phone. "Is everything okay at home?" Marcus asked, his tone suggesting this wasn't just friendly concern, but professional evaluation. The transition to director can be challenging, but personal organization is crucial at this level. Jake assured him everything was fine, but I knew from the way he slammed doors that evening that the pressure was building. His credit card statement showed he'd spent $8,000 in just 2 months on completely unnecessary expenses: replacement clothes, emergency services, late fees, missed discounts, and overpriced conveniences. Meanwhile, our savings account hadn't grown at all because he forgot to transfer the monthly automatic deposit I'd always managed. The tipping point came when he nearly missed a crucial IRS deadline for our estimated quarterly taxes. As a director with stock options and bonuses, the tax situation had become more complex. I'd always handled this, researching every deduction, every credit, every legal way to minimize our tax burden. Jake didn't even know estimated taxes were a thing. The penalty for late payment would have been $600 plus interest, plus the potential audit red flag. He found me in my home office where I was finishing a client's quarterly reports, earning my hourly rate while he hemorrhaged money. His face was pale. His expensive shirt wrinkled, his usually styled hair sticking up at odd angles. The estimated tax notice was crumpled in his fist. "Vada." He started, his voice lacking its usual director authority. "I need help with this tax thing." I looked up from my computer, my expression neutral. "I'm sure you can handle it, Jake. After all, you make $150,000 a year. That should be more than enough to hire a tax professional. But you've always done this. You know our situation, our deductions, our—" "I'm sorry," I interrupted gently. "I was under the impression that I contribute nothing to this household. I wouldn't want to interfere with your financial management." He stood there for a moment, the weight of the past 2 months visible in the slump of his shoulders. Then he turned and walked out, pulling out his phone to frantically search for tax professionals. The emergency consultation cost him $500, and the CPA he found charged 3 times what my careful management had saved us in previous years. Month 3 brought the ultimate humiliation, the company's annual directors' gala. This wasn't just any corporate event. It was the social highlight of the year, where directors and their spouses mingled with C-suite executives and board members. Appearances mattered, connections were made, and careers could be influenced by a single evening's impression. Jake had forgotten to book our flights and hotel 3 months in advance like I always did. By the time he remembered 3 weeks before the event, only premium seats were available. What should have cost $800 for both of us became $3,000 for last-minute business class tickets. The conference hotel was fully booked, so he had to reserve a room at a property 40 minutes away from the venue, adding hundreds in transportation costs. He also hadn't arranged for childcare. Our usual babysitter was unavailable, and the backup sitters I'd cultivated relationships with over the years didn't know him. He ended up hiring an expensive agency at $70 an hour for overnight care, required to pay a 4-hour minimum, even though the kids would be sleeping most of that time. I'd been preparing for the gala for months, having bought an elegant navy cocktail dress on sale in January and slowly accumulated the perfect accessories. Jake, on the other hand, realized the day before that his best suit no longer fit properly due to stress eating, and his formal shoes were scuffed beyond repair. Another emergency shopping trip, another $1,000 gone. The flight to Chicago was awkward. Jake kept checking his phone, worried about work emails he might be missing, appointments he might have forgotten. I read my book peacefully occasionally, responding to freelance client messages. I'd actually gained 3 new clients through referrals and was now making $6,000 a month, though Jake had no idea. At the hotel, Jake realized he'd forgotten to pack his cufflinks, the ones his father had given him that he always wore to important events. The concierge directed him to a jewelry store where he spent $300 on replacements. He'd also forgotten to make dinner reservations for the pre-gala networking session, leaving us to eat overpriced room service while his colleagues dined at exclusive restaurants. The gala itself was held at the Art Institute of Chicago, a breathtaking venue that demanded sophistication. I wore my carefully planned outfit and felt confident and comfortable. Jake fidgeted in his hastily purchased suit, constantly adjusting his tie and checking his phone. When we entered the grand ballroom, several heads turned, but not for the reasons Jake might have hoped. Vada Marcus's wife Elizabeth called out, gliding over in a stunning emerald gown. "You look absolutely radiant. I've been dying to talk to you about that investment strategy you mentioned at the last quarterly dinner. Richard and I implemented your suggestions, and we've already seen a 12% return." Jake's head snapped toward me. He hadn't known about my informal financial advice to other couples in his professional circle. As Elizabeth gushed about my insights on index funds and tax-advantaged accounts, other wives gathered around us. They peppered me with questions about everything from college savings plans to estate planning, clearly viewing me as a valuable resource. "You're so lucky," Jake said to Patricia, whose husband was the senior vice president. "My husband says I should hire someone like Vada to manage our portfolio. You must save a fortune having such a financially savvy wife." Jake's smile looked painted on as he absorbed this information. The conversation shifted to family management, and the women began sharing how challenging it was to balance their households, even with help. I mentioned casually some of the systems I'd implemented to keep our family running smoothly while managing my freelance clients. "Wait," Elizabeth interjected, looking confused. "Jake, didn't you tell Marcus that Vada doesn't work?" The silence was deafening. Jake's face flushed red as I calmly explained that I managed a freelance accounting practice alongside my household responsibilities. The other wives exchanged knowing looks, the kind that said they understood exactly what was happening in the Jameson household. Marcus approached our group, bourbon in hand, and clapped Jake on the shoulder. "Jake, my friend, I've been meaning to talk to you. That presentation hiccup last month, the missed deadlines, showing up to Thompson's dinner at the wrong venue. Everything okay? You know, at the director level, we need to have our affairs in order. Home life affects work performance." "Everything's fine," Jake stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. "You know?" Marcus continued, looking at me with genuine admiration. "Elizabeth tells me Vada helped her restructure our investments and saved us nearly $20,000 in taxes last year. That's the kind of partnership that makes a successful director. A man's only as strong as his support system." Later, during the silent auction for charity, I noticed Jake frantically checking our bank balance on his phone. He wanted to bid on a golf package to impress Marcus, but realized his recent spending spree had depleted our discretionary funds. Meanwhile, I calmly bid on and won a spa package using my personal credit card funded by my freelance earnings. The surprised look on Jake's face when they announced Mrs. Jameson as the winner was priceless. The president of the company, Mr. Davidson, made his rounds during dessert. When he reached our table, he remembered me from previous years. "Vada. My wife still raves about that holiday party planning guide you created for her. Said it saved her sanity during the season. Jake, you're a fortunate man. Behind every successful director is an exceptional partner." Jake nodded mechanically, the weight of the evening crushing his earlier arrogance. Every conversation highlighted what I brought to our partnership, what he'd dismissed as nothing. The final blow came when Elizabeth pulled me aside and offered me a consulting contract to manage her family's finances right in front of Jake. The monthly retainer she proposed was more than Jake's recent raise. Back in our hotel room, Jake sat on the bed in his wrinkled suit, his head in his hands. The confident director who'd called me a freeloader was gone, replaced by a man who'd finally understood the price of his words. I quietly changed into my pajamas, removed my jewelry, and prepared for bed as if nothing had happened. "Vada," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." About what I asked, applying my night cream with the same calm precision I'd maintained for 3 months. About everything. About what I said. About what I've been doing. About us. I turned to face him, really looking at him for the first time in months. He looked older, tired, defeated. The stress had added lines to his face and gray to his temples. His shoulders, usually squared with confidence, sagged with exhaustion. This was a man who'd learned his lesson the hard way, the expensive way, the public way. "I'm ready to listen," I said simply, sitting in the chair across from him. "But Jake understands something. I'm not the same woman who heard those words 3 months ago. That woman died that night in our kitchen. If we're going to talk, it's going to be about moving forward, not going back." Jake's composure finally cracked completely. For the first time in our 12 years of marriage, I watched my husband cry. Not the single tear at our wedding or the misty eyes when our children were born, but full-body shaking sobs that seemed to release months of built-up pressure and years of misguided priorities. "Vada, I'm an idiot," he choked out between sobs. "No worse than that. I'm an arrogant, blind, ungrateful fool who threw away the best thing in his life for a title and a salary bump." I handed him tissues from the hotel nightstand, maintaining my composure, even as part of me wanted to comfort him. But he needed to get this out, needed to fully understand what he'd done before we could move forward. "You contribute more than money," he continued, his voice steadier, but still thick with emotion. "You're the CEO of our family. You're the CFO, the COO, the chief, everything officer. That spreadsheet you think I didn't see on your laptop last month, I saw it, Vada. $54,000 a year in direct financial contributions, not even counting the 100,000 plus in services you provide." He stood up, pacing the small hotel room, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "But it's more than money. It's so much more. You're the one who remembers that Emma hates crusts cut vertically but loves them diagonal. You're the one who knows Noah needs exactly 12 minutes of wind-down time before bed, or he won't sleep. You're the one who noticed my dad was losing weight before his diabetes diagnosis and pushed him to see a doctor." The words poured out like a dam breaking. "You manage our entire life, Vada. Every appointment, every deadline, every birthday, every holiday, every maintenance schedule, every investment decision, every single detail that makes our life work. And I called you a freeloader. God, what kind of man says that to the woman holding his entire world together? I let him talk, let him purge 3 months of realizations and 12 years of taken-for-granted efforts. He talked about the morning coffee that appeared like magic, perfectly prepared to his preferences, that changed with the seasons. The way his favorite shirts were always clean and pressed for important meetings. The lunches that appeared in his briefcase with encouraging notes during stressful periods. The way I could stretch $1 into 10 while making our family feel rich in all the ways that mattered. "Do you know what happened last week?" he asked, his voice breaking again. "Noah had a nightmare and called for Mommy. Not Daddy, even though I was right there. Because you're the one who knows how to chase the monsters away. Emma needed help with her science project about butterflies, and I didn't even know she was afraid of caterpillars, because you've been helping her work through it gradually. I'm their father, and I don't know my own children the way you do." He collapsed back onto the bed, spent. "I've spent 3 months drowning in the basic maintenance of life while you've been thriving. You've expanded your business, maintained the children's schedules perfectly, and somehow looked more peaceful than you have in years. Meanwhile, I've spent $8,000 learning that money can't buy what you give our family freely every single day." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of Chicago traffic 40 floors below. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the glittering cityscape. You're right about one thing, Jake. Money can't buy what I provide. But respect, partnership, appreciation. Those shouldn't cost anything, and yet you couldn't afford to give them to me. I know, he whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, fundamentally sorry. I turned to face him. Sorry isn't enough, Jake. Not this time. If we're going to save this marriage, save our family, things need to change fundamentally. Not just you doing more housework or saying thank you more often. I mean real structural changes to how we operate as a couple and as a family. Anything, he said immediately. Whatever it takes. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app where I'd been drafting my conditions for weeks. First, we go to couples therapy. Not for a few sessions until you feel better, but for at least a year. We need to understand how we got here and how to never get here again. He nodded vigorously. Second, we completely restructure our financial arrangement. We maintain a joint account for household expenses, but we also have individual accounts. My freelance income goes into mine. Your bonuses go into yours. We both contribute proportionally to the household, based on our incomes, including the value of unpaid labor. Yes, absolutely. Third, you take on 50% of the household management. Not just chores, but the mental load. You'll manage certain aspects completely. Your family's birthdays and events, the yard maintenance one, child's activity schedule, certain bills. You'll learn what I do and appreciate it by doing it yourself. I can do that. I want to do that. Fourth, we hire help. A cleaning service twice a month and a part-time nanny for date nights and my client meetings. This is non-negotiable. If we can afford your golf membership and Marcus's overpriced dinner invitations, we can afford support for our family. Of course, we should have done that years ago. Fifth, you publicly acknowledge my contributions. Not in a patronizing way, but genuinely. At the next company event with your family, with our friends. You tell them the truth about who keeps this family successful. He stood up and walked toward me, stopping just out of reach, respecting the distance I'd maintained. Vada. I'll do all of that and more. I'll take out a full-page ad in the Denver Post if you want. I'll skywrite it over the city. You're not just my wife, you're my partner, my equal, my better half in every sense of the word. I lost sight of that, but I see it now. Crystal clear. I studied his face, looking for the arrogance that had started this whole situation. Instead, I saw humility, genuine remorse, and something else, fear. Fear that he'd broken something irreparable. There's one more thing, I said. My business. I've been offered several consulting contracts from people we met tonight. I'm going to accept them. I'm going to build something of my own, something that has nothing to do with supporting your career or maintaining your household. And you're going to support me the way I've supported you. Yes, he said without hesitation. God, yes. Vada. You could conquer the corporate world if you wanted to. You're brilliant, organized, strategic. I've watched you turn 30,000 into 50,000 through smart investments while I was bragging about my salary. You deserve your own success, your own recognition. We stood there in that Chicago hotel room, two people at a crossroads. The city lights sparkled below us like possibilities, like second chances, like hope. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 months ago, quietly accepting dismissal, swallowing my worth for the sake of peace. That woman was gone, but in her place stood someone stronger, someone who knew her value and wouldn't accept less than she deserved. Okay, I finally said. We can try. But Jake, understand this is your last chance. If you ever make me feel worthless again, there won't be a conversation. There won't be a negotiation. There will just be divorce papers and a calculator showing you exactly how much your arrogance cost you. I understand, he said solemnly. I swear to you, Vada, on our children's future, I will never forget this lesson. I will never forget your worth. I will spend the rest of our marriage making sure you know how valuable you are, not just to our family, but to me personally. The next 6 months were a complete transformation of the Jameson household. Jake threw himself into change with the same intensity he'd once reserved for climbing the corporate ladder. He started therapy individually before we began couples counseling, wanting to understand his own issues before we tackled them together. Dr. Morrison, our therapist, helped Jake recognize how his father's dismissive treatment of his mother had shaped his unconscious biases about domestic contribution. Jake took over managing relationships with his side of the family completely. The first time he independently planned and executed his mother's birthday celebration, complete with her favorite restaurant reservation, thoughtful gift, and handwritten card, she actually called me to ask if Jake was dying. When I explained he was simply taking responsibility for his own relationships, she said, "About damn time." I raised him better than he'd been acting. He became the primary parent for Noah's activities, learning the complex world of youth soccer schedules, tournament registrations, and equipment management. The first Saturday, he forgot shin guards and had to drive 20 minutes back home while the team warmed up without Noah. He sent me a text that simply said, "How did you never forget anything? You're superhuman." By month 3, he was the dad other parents turned to for schedule questions, and Noah beamed with pride when Daddy knew exactly which snack was needed for the away game. The financial restructuring revealed truths that shocked Jake even after everything he'd learned. When we sat down with our accountant to properly evaluate my contributions over the years, the number came to nearly $500,000 in saved expenses, earned income, and investment gains I'd researched and implemented. Jake stared at the paper for a full minute in silence, then said, "I called a $500,000 contributor a freeloader." "I'm surprised you didn't leave me that night." My consulting business exploded beyond my wildest dreams. Elizabeth's contract led to 3 more referrals, and within 4 months I was managing financial planning for 7 high-net-worth families. I incorporated as Valor Financial Consulting, a name Jake suggested, saying, "You've always had the valor to do what needed to be done for our family. Now others can benefit from your courage and wisdom." I hired my first employee, a part-time assistant, to manage scheduling and client communications. Jake converted half of his home office into my professional space, insisting I take the side with better natural light and the view of the mountains. He'd often bring me coffee during my client calls, quietly setting it on my desk with a smile, the same way I'd done for him for years. The cleaning service we hired twice a month was a revelation for both of us. The first time they came, Jake watched in amazement as a team accomplished in 3 hours what took us entire weekends. "We could have been spending that time with the kids or each other all these years," he said, shaking his head. "My pride cost us so much time we can't get back." Date nights became sacred. Every Friday, our part-time nanny Sarah would arrive at 5 p.m., and Jake and I would leave the house together. Sometimes we went to fancy restaurants, sometimes to dive bars for wings and beer. The important thing was talking, really talking, not about kids or house maintenance, but about dreams, fears, books. We'd read, places we wanted to travel. I fell in love with my husband again, but more importantly, he fell in love with the real me, not just the convenient household manager he'd taken for granted. Jake's public acknowledgement exceeded all my expectations. At the company's summer barbecue, Marcus asked him how he'd turned his performance around after the rocky start to his directorship. Jake stood up, tapped his beer bottle for attention, and gave an impromptu speech to the entire leadership team and their families. "You want to know my secret?" he said, his voice carrying across the yard. I stopped being an idiot and started recognizing that my wife Vada is the strategic genius behind our family's success. While I was bragging about my salary, she was turning our finances into a Fortune 500 level operation. While I was focused on my title, she was CEO of a complex organization called Our Family. I nearly lost everything because I confused earning money with creating value. Vada creates more value in a single morning than I do in a week at the office. The silence was deafening for a moment, then Elizabeth started clapping. Soon everyone was applauding, and several wives gave their husbands pointed looks. Marcus raised his glass to me and said, "To the partners who make us look good, even when we don't deserve it." Emma noticed the changes most of all. One evening, she found me in my office working on a client proposal. "Mom," she said, climbing into my lap despite being almost too big for it, "I want to be like you when I grow up. You're smart, and Dad respects you, and you help people with their money. Can you teach me about investments?" That weekend, Jake and I started a financial literacy program for both kids, teaching them about budgeting, saving, and investing with their allowance. Noah, ever practical, immediately started a spreadsheet to track his Pokemon card investments. Emma began a small business making bookmarks for her classmates, carefully calculating her profit margins. The trip to Hawaii finally happened a full year after Jake's promotion. But this time it was different. Jake planned everything from flights booked 3 months in advance to save money to researching family-friendly activities that would engage both kids. He created a detailed itinerary, but also built in flexibility, something he'd learned from watching me manage family vacations for years. On our last night in Maui, we sat on the beach watching the sunset while the kids built sandcastles nearby. Jake pulled out a small box from his pocket. Inside was a new wedding ring engraved with the date of what he called his awakening and the words, "Partners in everything." "I know I can't undo what I said or how I acted," he said, slipping the ring onto my finger next to my original wedding band. "But I can promise that every day for the rest of our lives, I'll remember that we're a team, that your contributions are invaluable, that I'm lucky to have you as my partner, not because you make my life easier, but because you make me better." Emma and Noah ran over, covered in sand, demanding to know if Daddy was proposing again. Jake laughed and said, "Every day, kids. I propose to your mother every single day because that's what she deserves." That night, after the kids were asleep in the hotel room, Jake and I walked along the beach hand in hand. The moon reflected off the water and the waves lapped gently at our feet. I thought about the journey we'd taken to get here, the pain and growth, the lessons learned at such a high price. "You know what the ironic thing is?" I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "If you'd never called me a freeloader, we might have continued exactly as we were forever. Me undervalued, you oblivious, both of us settling for less than we deserved from our marriage." Jake stopped walking and turned to face me. "So you're saying my horrible behavior actually saved our marriage?" "No," I laughed, poking him in the chest. "I'm saying that standing up for myself saved our marriage. Your horrible behavior just provided the catalyst. The real hero here is the woman who decided she was worth more than being called nothing." "That woman is definitely the hero," Jake agreed, pulling me close. "And I'm the lucky guy who gets a second chance to be her sidekick." 6 months later, my consulting firm had grown enough that I needed office space outside the home. Jake surprised me by signing a lease on a small suite in the building next to his office. "Partners support each other," he said, handing me the keys. "Plus now we can have lunch together without the commute." At my grand opening, attended by clients, family, and friends, Jake stood in the corner, beaming with pride. When someone asked him what he did instead of leading with his director title, he said, "I'm Vada's husband. She's the founder of Valor Financial Consulting. I'm just here to support her like she supported me all these years." Emma and Noah cut the ribbon together, with Emma announcing to the crowd that she was going to work for Mom someday. Noah added that he was going to be the receptionist because he liked talking to people. Everyone laughed, but I could see the future spreading out before us. A family built on mutual respect, children who understood that contribution isn't just about money, and a marriage that had been tested by fire and come out stronger. The local business journal ran a feature on women entrepreneurs, and my story was included. The headline read, "From Household CEO to Financial Consulting Success." In the article, I talked about the importance of recognizing unpaid labor, the value of domestic contribution, and how my husband's temporary blindness to my worth had ultimately led to both of us achieving more than we dreamed. Jake framed the article and hung it in his office right next to his diplomas. When Marcus commented on it, Jake said, "It's a daily reminder that success isn't just about what you achieve, but about recognizing and elevating the people who help you get there." Our couples therapy sessions decreased to once a month, then eventually ended with Dr. Morrison's blessing. "You two have done the work," she said at our final session. "Jake, you've completely reconstructed your understanding of partnership. Veda, you've claimed your worth without apology. Together, you've built something much stronger than what you had before." As we left her office for the last time, Jake took my hand. "You know what I learned through all this?" he asked. That sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that teach us the true value of what money can't buy. And what did the lesson cost you, I asked already, knowing the answer. Exactly $150,000 a year, he said with a rueful smile. The price of my promotion was almost the cost of my family. Thank God you didn't let me pay it. We drove home to our children, to our life, to our partnership. The house was filled with the chaos of family life. Noah's soccer gear by the door, Emma's art project on the dining table, the smell of the slow cooker meal I'd started that morning. Jake looked around at the beautiful disorder of our life and said, "This is worth more than any salary, any title, any promotion." "Now you get it," I said, kissing him gently. "It just took you a while to do the math." That evening, as we sat around the dinner table with our children sharing stories of our day, I thought about value and worth contribution and recognition. Jake had learned that my worth was never measured in dollars to begin with. But more importantly, I had learned something too. That my value existed whether or not anyone else recognized it. The moment I decided I was worth more than being called nothing was the moment everything changed. Sometimes I think about that night 3 months into Jake's promotion when he came home drunk on his own success and called me a freeloader. It was the worst night of our marriage, but it led to the best thing that ever happened to us. The truth. The truth about contribution, about value, about what really makes a family work. Now, when young couples ask us for marriage advice, we tell them this. Never confuse earning with contributing, never mistake money for value, and never ever underestimate the person who keeps your world turning while you're busy watching your bank balance. Because sometimes the most priceless contributions are the ones that never show up on a spreadsheet, and the most expensive mistakes are the ones that teach us what really matters. Our story became something of a legend in our social circle, a cautionary tale about taking your partner for granted, and a hopeful reminder that even the biggest mistakes can be overcome with genuine change. Jake became an advocate for spousal recognition at his company, even proposing a program where employees could acknowledge their partner's contributions during reviews and company events. Emma, now 11 and fierce in her convictions, wrote an essay for school about gender roles and domestic labor that made her teacher cry. She ended it with, "My mom taught my dad that her work at home was real work. But more importantly, she taught me that I should never let anyone tell me my contributions don't matter." Noah, 8 and wise beyond his years, once told his friend whose parents were divorcing, "Sometimes grown-ups forget to see each other. My dad forgot to see my mom for a while, but she made him remember. Maybe your parents just need to remember to see each other too." The ripples of our story spread further than we expected. 3 couples in Jake's office started marriage counseling after hearing about our journey. 2 stay-at-home moms in our neighborhood started their own consulting businesses inspired by my transition. One dad quit his high-paying job to be a stay-at-home parent, telling Jake, "You made me realize I was missing the promotion that really mattered, being present for my family." As I finish telling you this story, I want you to know something important. If you're feeling undervalued, unseen, or unappreciated, you're not alone. Your contributions matter whether they come with a paycheck or not. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is exactly what I did. Stop doing everything and let them see what nothing really looks like. But more than that, I want you to know that change is possible. People can learn, grow, and transform. Marriages can be rebuilt stronger than before. Respect can be learned by those who've forgotten how to give it. It took Jake exactly $150,000 a year to learn what I was worth, but the lesson made us both millionaires in what really matters: love, respect, partnership, and family. That's my story. The story of how being called a freeloader freed me to find my worth, and how a man who thought money was everything learned that everything he valued was actually free. It just required recognition, respect, and gratitude. What about you? Have you ever felt undervalued in your relationship? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about marriage, family, and finding your worth. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. someone who's forgotten their value, or someone who needs to remember the value of others. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, you're not a freeloader, you're not nothing, and your contributions matter more than you know. Until next time, this is Vada reminding you to know your worth and never settle for less.